Hey, today I'm sharing the secrets behind one of the most profitable and most successful emails that I've ever written of all time. This is an email that I tested probably about 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago. We implemented, we tested it, and it went on to generate 5 figures in revenue every single week. After that, 6 figures in revenue every single month, and seven figures in revenue over a 9 month period. 6 figures in profit. It was a complete monster. One of the things that was really key in working with this client at the time was really analyzing, okay, anytime you win, why did you win? Anytime you lose, why did you lose? So I did a great deal of work in terms of doing all the testing and learnings that got to this email, which I want to share with you today so that you can start implementing it in your business, not stealing the actual email copy, but thinking about like, what is the specific structure that I used for this email that you could translate for your business, for your offer, and really personalize it for your audience. Maybe not to get 6 figures in revenue over the next month, but I can tell you that regardless of what you're using, it's probably a step up. It's worthy of a test, I would say, at the very least, in terms of what you're looking for. So a little context in terms of what this email was. It was it was the first part of our automation coming off a quiz funnel. So somebody had gone through opted in for a free quiz and put in a bunch of information for that quiz. And this was the first step in terms of getting their results, kind of giving them the results and kind of feeding into the offer a little bit. So it was a weight loss offer altogether, more focused on women than men. And I'll walk you through, again, like even if you're not in the weight loss space, how you can start to translate that to whatever it is you're doing. Like this is going to be a structure that you can use regardless if you're in financial or any other industry, personal development, whatever it is, because it's kind of a universal structure. And again, I did the work in terms of like, again, designing the structure in the first place, but also thinking back and taking a look at it and looking at the test results and testing out some further emails as well. I really figured out like, okay, what were the specific lines? What were the specific parts of this? So I'm going to go, break down this email. Again, it wasn't even 300 words. Break it down into 4 specific sections that you can use. So if you want to watch, like, again, think of the end result as a 300-word email that you can start testing in your automation that can start generating revenue, 5, 6, maybe 7 figures over a time period. Kind of like thinking of it as like almost like a geyser of revenue and profits that can come through. Really speaking to your audience and bringing them forward to whatever specific offer you have. So like this is something that could, if you're in low ticket, in this case, it was a low ticket $37 or $40 offer, somewhere in there. But it can also work in terms of high ticket offers, even if you're presenting that. So in this case, I was sending traffic to a VSL, but it could work to a webinar, like whatever you're using in terms of getting that conversion, it can work. It can also work in my process where I drive people to respond, and then I go in a one-to-one sales conversation with them via email and sell high ticket offers, 10, 20, 30K type of offers in that framework. So it's a structure that can very universal across the map in terms of, whatever specific industry or offer, high ticket, low ticket, that you can utilize, use the parts of it. I'm going to kind of explain some of the psychology around that as well. So one thing I want to start with before I jump in, again, if it's the first time joining one of my lives, I'm Brian Czekanski. I help coaches and experts in particular 10x their high ticket sales. So again, think of those 10, 20, 30K type of offers, one-to-one coaching, masterminds, whatever it is right now. I don't do any sales calls whatsoever. I have email one-to-one sales conversations. And usually for the partners that I work with, they have a sales team that is crushing it. And what I do is kind of sweep up all those lost sales that kind of fall through the cracks along the way. So those people that, maybe current buyers that went into their course or maybe watched their webinar and didn't follow up, or those people that maybe said no to their sales team, or maybe didn't even show up to that sales call that they booked. All those people are perfect opportunities for me to reactivate kind of those disengaged, all those leads that your sales team has given up on. Those are the leads that I want to interact with via email, get them re-engaged in a sales conversation, and do that all via a one-to-one email conversation. So they don't have to jump on a sales call. They don't have to figure out what time works for them. I do it when it makes sense for them, and at what time it makes, like, I reply when it makes sense for me, and I work them through that process and ultimately close them for my coaching partners. And again, like, my end promise is kind of getting those 5 or 6 figures and that additional capacity filled in that high ticket program that you have over time. So let's jump into some of the psychology. I just want to start with maybe just one slide that kind of goes into a little bit in terms of like why this worked and some of the components that went into it a little bit. So I'll just pull that up right here. So this was a slide that so it wasn't my, like, this is kind of the framework that I always have in the back of my mind. Anytime I'm writing an email or anytime I'm running a campaign, like, here's all the marketing tools, here's the core message, here's the emotional drivers that my audience has to go through to go from a cold prospect or maybe even a warm prospect. Maybe they're a low ticket buyer that has bought your course before or some other or book or whatever it is. And we're trying to move them up to a high ticket offer. Again, even if you're working in low ticket, maybe you're selling a 10 or 20 or 30 dollar offer. These are all the key beliefs that you kind of have to shift with them along the way. These are the emotional drivers that you have to, and I would say, like, this was kind of the brilliance of another copywriter called Alex Catoni. She did a presentation probably 3 or 4 years ago in a mastermind that I was a part of. This was part of her presentation, kind of the triangle and things like that. So, like, this is definitely not my brilliance, but all thanks to kind of Alex Catoni. But again, this is always in the back of my mind of like, okay, like, what specific elements do I have to hit from my audience so that they get to the point where it's like, oh, they go from a skeptical, cold prospect to a warm prospects that's ready to buy and are really excited to get started along the way. So you kind of see the different elements here. And you really, especially if you're doing email, you want to think of like, okay, if you're sending them to a VSL or a webinar, you don't have to have all these elements here, but it's helpful to have 2 out of the 4 or 3 out of the 4. The email structure that I'll give you today doesn't have all 4 of these emotional drivers in there. I'll kind of say that, but it's only because I sent them to a VSL that kind of cover that other point. So in this case, I didn't provide a lot of social proof. I didn't, what kind of things, where are you driving traffic to? Where are you driving these leads to? What's that next step? And what emotional drivers might they be carrying as well? And how can you really complement the email with wherever you're sending them? So you don't want to be rehashing all these things on all those things. You want to kind of go a little bit deeper in terms of some of these emotional drivers to make sure it hits. But really think about that as you go along the way. And again, keeping these kind of core messages in mind is really helpful, especially as we jump into the email. So it kind of start with the foundation here is really, making your audience feel understood, that they're in the right place, that this is finally a place where they're going to find a solution to maybe a pain point that they've been dealing with for decades. So in this case, I was selling a weight loss offer to people that in some cases had been dealing with weight issues for 20, 30 years. They've lost weight, they've gained the weight, all those kind of things. So highly skeptical type of audience. So it's really important for me, especially in this email, spend a lot of time, a good portion of that, making them feel understood, that I understood their journey. Didn't exactly use storytelling. Again, this was only 300 words, so I didn't have the space, or I didn't feel like it was necessary as well. So I'll talk about how, again, it doesn't always have to be storytelling, but I'll talk through kind of a different way that you can use that along the way. So part 1 is kind of thinking about, and this is something that I was reminded by Travis Sago, is one of my mentors, and I just read his book this past week. One of the things that he talked about is like letting your audience do the marketing for you, really bringing their words back to you, like use their words to attract those next new customers that you have. Like, can you go back to those successful customers that you've had that have raving results, and how can we take their words, how they would describe their journey, the problem, all those kind of things, and get them to the other side. So the first part of this email that I would talk about in this structure, the first part that I used in the email that I used, it was only a few lines. Again, we're not using a ton of words here. It was 2 or 3 lines really describing the problem that they have. So like the differentiator here that I used within this email is I broke down like within the quiz, but this is what I would suggest as well, is like really think about like within your email list, you probably have a variety of different avatars on there. So like you probably have at least 3 or 4 avatars on your list right now. And most people will try and put together an email or marketing that speaks to that whole entire group. And I would tell you, especially for this email, one of the key differentiators is I made it a more dynamic email. So based on those quiz result, like based on the inputs that they gave me, we put them into a specific category, a specific segment. I think I don't know the exact number of categories we came up with. I think it was around 6 or 7 that we had in terms of the weight loss categories that we had. For you, it might be 3 or 4, but this is really goes back to like understanding, like, where does your audience sit? So again, think of like a weight loss offer. We were marketing to people that were 30 years old that have been kind of struggling with losing weight after having a baby, all the way up to people that were 70 years old that were past menopause, have been dealing with weight issues for a long period of time. Like if you're trying to speak to that 30-year-old, who's just trying to lose the baby weight and trying to do the same and talk to them in the same way that you're talking to that 70-year-old, which is in a completely different situation, obviously the results in terms of your marketing isn't going to be as effective. So in this case, like one of the things that I went like, and I didn't even know if it was possible, but I went to the email marketing list manager that I had, and I said, like, can we make this email dynamic based on their quiz results, like based on the category we put them in? Can I write one email and just have it kind of like a certain sections of the email personalized based on like what is specific to them? And again, I thought it was kind of a shot in the dark. I am not tech savvy whatsoever, but based on the email service provider that we used, and it might not be possible for you, but like, again, I know if you go into active campaign right now, you could create different segments or different, maybe it's just a matter of kind of like segmenting out, different, avatars based on, again, some information you get. It might be a survey, it might be a quiz, like whatever it is. I would tell you that like getting some inputs to be able to segment your audience and be able to personalize that email is going to make a big difference. It might not be the first email in your automation. You might go through a survey. You might put a survey out there in day 5 or 6, and then eventually be a little bit more personalized. So maybe that's where your email sits. But like, if you are going to figure out like, okay, like where is this person coming in from? Like, what's their situation like? And this is where it was really key. In those first few lines, what I did was really call out the problem that they're dealing with in the words that they would use. So I went through in those 6 or 7 different segments. I went back to our testimonials. I found that exact person or series of different people that we'd gotten video testimonials for. We also had a couple different services that anytime somebody joined as a new customer, we would ask them via video to describe their problem, what they had tried before. So I had a ton of different resources, and really breaking down those 6 or 7 categories, I had a ton of people that I could go back to in terms of their specific words. And the reason that why video versus written testimonials or even inquiries to like new customers isn't as helpful is because people tend to edit their words. Like I want people jumping in on video, especially if they're a new customer, they're going to be excited to get moving forward. They're going to kind of give you a little bit more. They're going to be a little bit more vulnerable. They're closer to their current problem than say that person that maybe lost 30 pounds, but they joined 3 or 6 months ago. So like these new customers that you have, like think about creating an avenue for them to give you back. Like, okay, like I joined this program. Here's why I joined this program. Here's what I'm dealing with. Here's the exact words, phrases, moments where my pain point is coming out the most. And that's exactly what I used. I used those exact words, phrases, and really echoed them back to my audience. But again, it was super specific. I wasn't speaking to that 70-year-old in the same way that I was speaking to that 30-year-old, because I know they had completely different views of the world in terms of their view of their problem, all those kind of things. So again, 2 or 3 lines, but I did a lot of work in terms of like thinking dynamically, how can we switch out that copy so that it's the right words. Like they get to that page again, go back to the words before, like feeling understood, like I get you. Like again, 2 or 3 lines that echoes back their specific language, those specific words, those specific situations where their pain point is the most. So like those 2 or 3 lines basically went like, hey, I understand you're going through this specific situation. It's affecting you at these specific moments of the day. Here's exactly how you would describe it. So I kind of met kind of like a more empathetic type of tone, like kind of met them exactly where they are. And in that way, I'm showing them kind of a new type of solution. Like nobody else out there is personalizing it and using their exact words to that. And again, the more you segment, the more you personalize, the more it's going to have the impact. So I would kind of ask you to go as deep as possible, figure out like, okay, who are these segments that I have on my list? So to give you a couple of different examples, the past few clients that I've worked with, obviously weight loss, especially women, but also men. Worked with a men's weight loss coach just a few months ago. Again, there was a huge amount of variability. So you had people that were men that were 50, 60 years old and were kind of struggling to they had joint pain and all those other things that go along with getting older. But you also had 30-year-olds that were just trying to get in better shape. They've kind of fallen off the wagon because they focused on business or things like that. So, they weren't looking to lose 30 pounds. They were just kind of looking to get back to their peak performance that they had maybe a few years ago. So another one would be like working with, and in the past worked with kind of like a midlife crisis coach. So again, this is a men's offer, but probably 45 to 55. Again, you'd think there's not a ton of variability in terms of like that specific audience, but within that, there's a lot of different problems. So you had those people that were going through a divorce or had been divorced, and that was causing the crisis. You had other people that were struggling on their business or their job, and that was causing the crisis, and kind of had 3 or 4 different segments as I found that I had to speak to in that. So again, personalizing the email and not trying to create broad messaging allows that person from the very get-go to say, I understand you. This is, you're finally in the right place, using that empathy as your way of doing that. So again, part 1 is super important. Kind of the first line of any email is almost like the most important one, because you can't catch their attention, let them know they're in the right place and that your offer is differentiated. You're going to lose the rest of the email doesn't matter. So I did spend a lot of time on part 1, but it's super important to think about like, how can I personalize this? And again, maybe your email service provider can't do it in the same way that we did in terms of just kind of swapping that out based on the quiz and things like that. So think about maybe creating, again, maybe branch out your automation into 4 separate categories, even if it's for that first email. That will allow you to, again, meet your audience exactly where they are, catch their attention, let them know they're in the right place, let them know that they're actually understood and that they're in a safe place as well. And it kind of gets into, again, 2 or 3 lines, wasn't a ton of words, but it was echoing back their exact language, how they would describe their problem, what they're going through right now, and kind of moving on to the next section. So the next section is all about, calling out their current plan and why they hate it. So again, a lot of people are going through problems and they're trying a lot of different things. And again, this is where like really personalizing the email is really important, because that person that is 60, 70 years old is probably not doing the intense cardio of, say, somebody that is 30 years old. So the situation is completely different. How they approach their problem over a long period of time, especially if they've been dealing with that problem for decades now, they're probably, they have a more skeptical view of how plans work and things like that. So to give you an example, within this audience, go back to those 60 and 70-year-olds that I was marketing to within this audience. A lot of them had, did have success in kind of losing weight using in some of those instances something like keto. So keto is something that they always called out like, hey, I lost 10 or 20 pounds on keto. I was really successful. But the problem was like, I didn't want to eat that keto diet for the rest of my life. And when I went back to my usual diet, I gained all that weight back and it wasn't sustainable. So like that would be an example of like something I could call out in my email, being a little bit more personalized in terms of doing that. For that younger crowd, maybe the 20 or 30-year-olds that I was dealing with, it was all about like, okay, all the things that I was doing before in terms of cardio, intense workouts, all that stuff that I was doing in my early 20s that helped me lose weight, it's not working anymore. And kind of calling out why they're spending more and more time and getting less and less results. So you can kind of see like, again, it's more of a kind of the extremes of who I was talking to, but you can see how like, if you're talking to your audience in the same way and trying to generalize it to everybody, it's just not going to resonate as much. So again, being able to personalize like, okay, here's exactly what you think is going to work. Here's what you're trying right now, and calling out like why they hate it so much, like kind of drawing up some of those emotional drivers that you can do that as much, stir up their emotions. And what you're going to do, especially as you try to introduce your solution, as I get into the further parts, is like why your solution doesn't include any of those things that they hate. So like to give you a preview of what I'm going to talk about is like in my plan, like if you talked about kind of those people that tried keto, like, hey, in my plan, you don't have to give up your favorite foods. You don't have to give up you don't have to give up carbs. You don't have to, again, for the younger crowd, you don't have to do hours and hours of cardio every day. You actually have to do a shorter amount of time, maybe like, okay, 45 minutes on a weekly basis, like whatever it is that makes it sense. So like thinking about what is their current plan, what do they hate, and how can I kind of like symmetrically kind of mirror that for my plan and say like, actually, it's not going to do any of these things, but before we get there, before we start to tease out our offer, we kind of have to give them an aha moment. So like this was a key part of my email. I know I've tested several different times, but for me, it was kind of giving them that aha moment around why they have their problem in the first place. Kind of like, again, kind of that unique mechanism behind their problem, like something they didn't even realize was happening. And why this email was so effective is I can kind of talk about like how the stuff that they were trying in terms of extreme dieting, in terms of their intense exercise, was kind of exacerbating this problem that they had. I called out, in this case, cortisol hormone. So anytime they were doing all that dieting and exercising, they might have lost weight for a couple of weeks, but it always came back because they were always, all those things were kind of ramping up their cortisol hormone, and their cortisol hormone at very high levels was going to always bring back that belly fat that they hated, all that weight that they had back. So again, really, as they start, and for your audience, it starts to bring back, like, how can you almost create an image in their mind of like, wow, like all the stuff that I've been trying, like this gives me a way, like this takes away a lot of the self-blame. So like, again, for those people maybe a little bit older in the audience, like they were trying all these things. They might have lost weight for a couple weeks or a couple months, but it always came back. And what that did is place a lot of self-blame on them, saying like there's something wrong with me. So by introducing kind of like this new problem that they never even considered before, and is kind of outside their control, what that did is kind of like push off that self-blame and say like, wow, like actually I can finger point to this, external or internal problem in this case that you never even knew existed or even considered before. And it helps, like not only take off that self-blame, but it kind of explains why everything that they've tried before hasn't worked. So kind of providing that aha moment of like, wow, like this makes a ton of sense. Like it's not my fault. This is exactly why the stuff that I've been like doing hasn't sustainably worked over the long term. And it offers them up. It puts them in a place where they're ready to consider a new opportunity, a new vehicle, and that again gets down to the final part here. But again, like if you're not weight loss, if you're not in health, like it doesn't matter what industry you are. Like think of like something that you can point the finger to in terms of a problem that they didn't know existed. Give them an aha moment in terms of like, wow, I never considered that before. I never even knew that existed. For some of my audience, they didn't even know what the stress hormone is or the belly fat. I called it the belly fat hormone, but cortisol is something that it wasn't even in their purview. Like it wasn't even something considered. It wasn't something their doctor mentioned, all those kind of things. So like, how can you provide something that maybe isn't completely out of the blue? Maybe some of your audience knows about it, but how can you point the finger and provide an enemy that they didn't, or a villain that they didn't know existed? That's really important, especially in this email, but also in all your emails, thinking about the structure. How can I point to a villain externally or internally that they hadn't considered before? That's going to take the blame off them and saying like, hey, those problems that you thought were a sign of you being deficient or you not being good enough, like most people don't feel good enough. Their self-worth in many cases is lower than what it should be. So how can you take off some of that self-blame, point the finger at something else? Really powerful way in your marketing to get some of those conversions. Huge part of that, for this email, it took a lot of testing to figure out like, okay, like what could I call cortisol? I called it, I eventually tested into belly fat hormone, because belly fat was a huge part of my audience, but test into like, what are some of those unique names that you can give, that villain? Can you give it a unique name? So it kind of, again, is kind of itched into their mind as they're going through and doing their current plan, as they step away from an email. And even if they don't buy, how can they step away and go back to their current plan and think of like, oh, wait, is this dieting that I'm doing, this cardio that I'm doing right now? This is probably raising my cortisol. And this is probably the reason that I'm not losing weight. It's not something wrong with me. So again, think about how you can kind of create an aha moment in terms of like the true source of that person's problem. and that puts them in the right place in terms of belief to get to that final step, the final part of this email structure, which is really offering a new, differentiated, desirable way out. So again, in terms of our solution, we talked about how it was all structured around cortisol, lowering that cortisol in terms of specific foods, activities, all those kind of things that are personalized to this market. Like, what are all the things that you're again, bring it back to their current plan. What are they fed up with? So again, if they hate working out of the gym for hours and hours and hours, you should have an offer that's differentiated enough that again doesn't force them to do that, or give up their favorite foods, or only have to eat meat, or give up carbs, or any of those kind of things. Like, think of how you can create an offer or present your offer in a way, in a new differentiated way. Again, and it's even better. Like, the final step is to think about like why your offer, your plan is something that only you can provide. Like, no other partner out there can provide this level of a way out, because you thought this, and this. Again, going back to Travis Sago, talks about kind of creating a mini monopoly. So how can you create a monopoly within your industry? By having such a differentiated offer that kind of speaks to what your audience wants, what they're fed up with in terms of all the stuff they've tried before, and gets them fast, easy, cheap, like maybe not cheap, but like fast, accelerated results. That is a much smoother ride that gets them there faster. And again, go back to that aha moment of giving them that aha moment, but also connecting it to the solution that you have. Like, why is your solution, again, going to lower their cortisol, or maybe even raise a hormone might have, or just, again, think of it as kind of like a seesaw. How can I reduce that problem that they have, or neutralize that problem that they have with maybe something different? So this is in your marketing. And again, I didn't do it in this email, but it's something that you could test into, or maybe improve upon this structure, as well as like, how can you provide kind of like that superhero type of, we have this villain in terms of our problem. What's this superhero type of solution? Give it a unique name, so it's kind of etched in their mind. That's how you can kind of create that mini monopoly, creating that intellectual property around your offer, around your solution, around the unique mechanism behind your solution, giving it a unique name. So it's kind of etched in their mind of like, hey, if I want to reach this destination, the only way I can get there is via this offer, because it handles X problem, and I don't have to deal with all the junk that I've dealt with in the past. And it helps explain why, again, in the past, why all those other things that I might have tried or even considered aren't going to work, because they don't consider this one specific problem. It's not personalized to that. And again, as you go through and personalize this for your email, it's going to go back to, so if I could just go back to the earlier slide, in terms of the emotional drivers, again, I did a lot of work in terms of like making them feel understood. This was really critically important for this email, but it might not be, like, again, it's going to be key if you use this in any industry, but I spent a lot more time of it in terms of the email copy of like, okay, you finally reached the right place. Because I know for my audience, for a lot of them, they've been dealing with weight issues for a long period of time. So like, okay, I want to offer a new opportunity. I want to start with some empathy. I want to let them know that I understood where they were coming from, what they've tried before, what they're fed up with, and really aligning that with, again, kind of the top here, getting them excited about why this is a new way out. This isn't just the same old junk you've been trying, or kind of differentiation around that. Again, in making them feel empowered. A lot of the social proof and transformations of people just like them. Again, I could have tested out putting in some images, some before and afters, maybe just a one line of a testimonial. I could have done that. The only reason I didn't do that was because I was going to a VSL that had all those things. And then safe in terms of the guarantee, the authority, the credibility, the roadmap. Again, I was really thinking of, again, by personalizing it, by speaking their language, and by giving them that aha around like, okay, like, I've got you because I'm finally dealing with the true source of your problem. Giving them that aha moment in many ways was doing that. So I would really think of like, okay, 3 out of the 4 I really covered in this email by personalizing it, speaking to what they were dealing with, what they were fed up with, giving them that aha moment, and finally getting them to, again, that excitement point, that motivation of like, okay, like this is like this plan is finally going to work with me because they've really thought methodically about what's really the true cause of my problem, why that other stuff hasn't worked sustainably. And they seem to get me. Like they're speaking my language, the words, the phrases, in terms of calling that out, the specific moments in my day where my problems are. So again, really starting with in review, kind of going through this email, an email that generated, again, six figures a month for 9 months, over a million in terms of revenue, six figures in profits for the client that I was working with at the time. Kind of starting with, again, like think about how you can break down your email list into at least 3 or 4 different segments so you can personalize from the very top and calling out what they're going through right now, what the problem is. That will get you to, again, personalizing in terms of like what's their current plan, what are they trying right now to solve that problem, that that bleeding neck problem that they have to get solved today, yesterday, whatever it is. Like what are they trying right now, and what do they hate about all those other options that are out there? Maybe they're not doing anything right now, but they are scouring the internet and considering those options and thinking about like, I don't want to, like, my problem is terrible, but I don't want to have to do all these all those side effects or those trade-offs that they might have to have that solution along the way. That will get you into kind of part number 3, which is kind of that aha moment. Give them the true source of their problem. There's something that they haven't considered before. Maybe it's something they haven't even heard before. Allow the email, the copy, to kind of point the finger at a villain. That will take away a lot of the self-blame and allow them to feel better about themselves. Number one, and number two, like, okay, like this plan is going to be different because all the other plans that I've tried either exacerbated that problem and made it worse, and that's what led to me failing in the past, or just didn't consider it. So again, that really steps into part 4, kind of introducing a new way out, a differentiated solution that they don't have to deal with all the trade-offs of what the current plan is right now, but will actually get them sustainable results because it's really thoughtful about addressing that true source of the problem that they might have, and getting them really excited through all the benefits, results, what they're going to get on the other side, quicker, faster, easier than they might be trying right now. So went through a lot of detail right now. Again, spent a lot of time. Again, this email was only 300 words, but it took a lot of thought, energy, testing, and everything else to get here. So, like, to give you an idea, before I even got to this email, like, I tested out a few other emails before that really failed miserably versus the current control, versus the control at that time. But the good thing is, like, all those failures that I had, I spent some time figuring out, like, okay, like, why did they fail? What were some of the techniques I had in there? So I would encourage you to do the same. Like, even if you go out there, and the other part as well is, like, always be testing. Like, that's important. Like, regardless if you, like, again, we had this really successful email. Like, we probably should have done more testing to try and beat it out over time. And it's something that I wish I did and kind of advocated for. But, like, anytime you have a winner that is doing really well, what changes can you potentially make? Like, a change that I might have made is, like, okay, can I throw in a testimonial? Can I throw in a testimonial image? Is that gonna give us a 10% bump or 25% bump to get me even better profit? So again, this one was doing six figures a month. Could I even push that up higher by testing out certain specific sections in terms of adding in some of those more emotional drivers along the way? So maybe personalizing some of those testimonials within the email would have resulted in further things. So always be testing your stuff. But again, as you test out this structure, regardless of what industry or offer you have right now, happy to kind of brainstorm some ideas in terms of what specific avatars you might have on your email list, depending on what your business is or offer is. So happy to kind of brainstorm some ideas in the comments. So let me know there. Whatever platform you're watching on, hit that like button. And if you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you on a future live.